The year 1991 marked a turning point in human history. The Soviet Union, a superpower that had loomed large over the world for decades, crumbled. It dissolved into 15 separate nations. This event sent shockwaves across the globe. The Cold War, a decades-long standoff between the Soviet Union and the West, finally ended. The Soviet Union's collapse reshaped the geopolitical landscape. It ushered in an era of unipolarity, with the United States as the sole superpower. The world watched as the Iron Curtain, a symbol of division for generations, was lifted. Economic stagnation, political repression, and ethnic tensions had plagued the Union for years. The Soviet-Afghan War, a costly and ultimately futile conflict, further weakened the Soviet grip on power. The fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989 served as a powerful symbol of the Soviet Union's waning influence. It emboldened independence movements within the Soviet republics. This eventually led to the Soviet Union's dissolution. In the 1980s, Mikhail Gorbachev took the helm of the Soviet Union. He inherited a system riddled with problems. Gorbachev understood the need for change. He implemented reforms like perestroika and glasnost, aiming to revitalize the Soviet system. Perestroika aimed to restructure the stagnant Soviet economy. Glasnost aimed to increase openness and transparency in government. Gorbachev's reforms, while well-intentioned, had unintended consequences. Economic reforms led to shortages and inflation, fueling public discontent. Political openness gave voice to long-suppressed nationalist sentiments within the Soviet republics. The Soviet Union was comprised of diverse republics, each with its own history, culture, and language. Gorbachev's reforms unintentionally awakened a sense of national identity that had long been suppressed under Soviet rule. The Baltic states, Ukraine, and the Caucasus republics began to assert their autonomy. Gorbachev's attempts to reform the Soviet system ultimately hastened its demise. His reforms loosened the grip of the Communist Party and empowered nationalist movements. Behind the Soviet Union's facade of strength, cracks had been forming for years. The centrally planned economy struggled to keep pace with the West. Despite vast resources, the Soviet Union faced chronic shortages of consumer goods. Citizens endured long lines and limited choices. This neglect fueled public dissatisfaction. Deep-seated ethnic tensions added to the woes. The Soviet-Afghan War further exposed the weaknesses of the Soviet system. In August 1991, a group of hardline communists, alarmed by Gorbachev's reforms and the Soviet Union's weakening grip, attempted to seize power. The coup leaders placed Gorbachev under house arrest. They aimed to roll back his reforms and preserve the Soviet Union. However, the coup faced immediate and widespread opposition. Citizens took to the streets in protest, defying the coup leaders and demanding Gorbachev's reinstatement. Boris Yeltsin, the newly elected president of the Russian Republic, emerged as a powerful voice of resistance. He rallied the people against the coup, standing atop a tank in a show of defiance that would become iconic. The coup leaders, lacking popular support and facing a groundswell of opposition, faltered. Within days, the coup collapsed, and Gorbachev was returned to power. The failed coup shattered the illusion of Soviet unity and exposed the fragility of the Communist Party's grip on power. The August coup, though short-lived, had dealt a fatal blow to the Soviet Union. Let us imagine a different course of history. What if the Soviet Union had weathered the storms of the late 20th century? What if it had remained intact? The year is 2024. The Soviet flag still flies over the Kremlin, a symbol of resilience against the odds. The world is a very different place. The Cold War never truly ended. The Soviet Union and the United States remain locked in an ideological struggle, their rivalry shaping global politics. The world is divided into two blocks, each suspicious of the other. The risk of nuclear annihilation, a constant fear during the Cold War, still hangs over humanity. The United States does not enjoy the unipolar moment it experienced after the Soviet collapse. It faces a rival superpower limiting its influence on the world stage. The global balance of power is altered. Eastern Europe remains under Soviet influence, its people denied the freedoms and opportunities that came with the fall of the Iron Curtain. The dream of a unified Europe, a continent free from division, remains unrealized. In this alternate 2024, the world is a chessboard. The Soviet Union and the United States are the players. Each makes strategic moves and countermoves on the global stage. Proxy wars, a hallmark of the Cold War, continue to erupt in various regions. They serve as outlets for superpower rivalry. The Soviet Union, despite its internal challenges, remains a formidable military power. Its nuclear arsenal serves as a deterrent against any direct confrontation with the West. The arms race, a defining feature of the Cold War, continues, albeit at a slower pace. Both sides pour vast resources into developing new and more deadly weapons systems, ensuring a perpetual state of tension. The Soviet Union's continued existence prevents the emergence of a unipolar world dominated by the United States. This creates a more multipolar system where power is more diffuse. The arms race, a terrifying hallmark of the Cold War, casts a long shadow over this alternate 2024. Both the Soviet Union and the United States possess vast nuclear arsenals capable of unimaginable destruction. The threat of nuclear annihilation, a constant fear during the original Cold War, remains an ever-present reality. The continued arms race has profound consequences for global security. It diverts vast resources away from essential needs, such as education, healthcare, and infrastructure development. It creates an atmosphere of paranoia and mistrust, hindering international cooperation. The development of new and increasingly sophisticated weapon systems heightens the stakes of the Cold War. Both sides develop complex early warning systems and elaborate command and control structures designed to prevent an accidental nuclear exchange. The fear of nuclear war permeates every aspect of life. In this alternate timeline, the Soviet Union's continued existence has a significant impact on the global economy. The Soviet Union maintains its centrally planned economy, largely isolated from the global capitalist system. This isolation limits its economic growth and technological advancement. The Soviet Union's technological development takes a different path. Without the integration into the global capitalist system, it focuses on developing technologies that serve its own needs, such as military hardware and space exploration. The absence of the Soviet Union's collapse means that the world does not experience the rapid globalization that characterized the late 20th and early 21st centuries. International trade and investment flows are significantly lower. The Internet, a transformative technology that connected the world in the late 20th century, develops differently. It is less ubiquitous and more fragmented, divided along ideological lines. The Soviet Union's continued existence creates a world with distinct technological spheres of influence. The Cold War's enduring legacy is most acutely felt in the global South. The Soviet Union and the United States continue to compete for influence in developing countries, often supporting different sides in regional conflicts. Proxy wars, a tragic hallmark of the Cold War, continue to erupt in various parts of the world, causing immense suffering and instability. The Soviet Union, eager to expand its sphere of influence, supports socialist and communist movements in Africa, Asia, and Latin America. The United States, determined to contain the spread of communism, counters Soviet influence by supporting anti-communist governments and movements. The Global South becomes a battleground for superpower rivalry with devastating consequences for its people. Proxy wars in Angola, Mozambique, Afghanistan, Nicaragua, and elsewhere result in millions of deaths and displace countless others. The Soviet Union's continued existence creates a world vastly different from our own. The Cold War's shadow looms large, shaping global politics, economics, and technology. The world is more divided, more militarized, and more fearful of the future. This counterfactual history serves as a reminder of the profound impact of the Soviet Union's collapse. It highlights the significance of that historical turning point. The end of the Cold War, though not without its challenges, ushered in an era of relative peace and stability. It allowed for greater cooperation on global issues such as climate change and international terrorism. While our world still faces numerous challenges, the specter of nuclear annihilation no longer hangs over us as it did during the Cold War. The Soviet Union's collapse, though decades in the making, sent shockwaves across the globe. It marked the end of an era. The world grappled with the implications of this seismic shift in the global order. The Soviet Union's legacy, however, continues to shape our world in profound ways. The collapse of the Soviet Union serves as a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked authoritarianism, economic stagnation, and ethnic tensions. It highlights the importance of democratic values, economic opportunity, and respect for human rights. The world we live in today, shaped by the events of 1991, is a testament to the transformative power of change.